What is good? What is good? What is good, my people? Hello there. My name is Jeff Allen. Welcome to Get Better Soon, a blog and podcast with practical ideas and strategies to help you win at the game of life. Today's topic is why changing your mind is a skill. A quick note here. We are going to handle some controversial topics. I'll make fun of the left and I'll make fun of the right. But hold on to your butts. You're going to be all right, I promise. But part of the reason I wanted to include some hot button issues is that because the topic is about changing your mind, and so I'm going to attempt to change yours. Now, if you disagree with me, you think, "Hey, Jeff, you're full of shit, man." Change my mind. Write a comment on the post. You can contact me. I'll list my email at the end, and I'll also list that in the show notes. So you can contact me there. If you want to write a guest post or you want to come on my podcast at some point and argue with me, although let's have a civil conversation. I prefer that. Please do so. So anyways, I'm open to changing my mind, and I hope you are open to changing your mind, and that's the topic for today. You've all heard the quote, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results." So to get different results, we have to change our mind. Now that may sound obvious, but people don't often change their mind. I think any of us, if we examine a lot of the people that we know, we would find that that's true, that people mostly stay the same, right? People are creatures of habit. They do their thing on the weekdays, whether that's going to school or going to work or whatever it is that they do. Then on the weekends, they have their hobbies or they go out for nice meals or, again, whatever it is that they do, right? People tend to kind of do the same things over and over. And the problem is, going back to the quote, right, is that if we do the same thing over and over and expect different results, we're going to be sorely disappointed. And yet, when people oftentimes try to make a change, they try to make a change without changing anything, right? They're like, "Oh, I want to lose weight." And so then they sort of try to eat a little less. And maybe they don't, they cut out a day or two of drinking alcohol or whatever have you, right? Or maybe they go to the gym once or twice more a week. But those are pretty small changes, and they're not going to amount to very quick progress. And then a lot of people are like, "Well, fuck it, I'm just going to quit. This isn't even working." So this is why people generally don't change, right? People who are overweight tend to stay overweight. People who aren't in relationships tend to not have relationships. People who often change relationships a lot tend to continue to change those relationships a lot. Addicts remain addicts. Obviously, there's people that break free, but a lot of people, pretty much how they are is how they're going to be. And the goal of this podcast is to help you change, right? To change your mind and to change how you live for the better. One of the traps that we fall into that I'll mention first is emotions. So emotions trap us in the sense that they create a condition where we resort to comfort. And comfort comes in the form of the things that we're used to. So a good example here is, "Oh man, it was just a terrible day at work. It was awful. I'm gonna have a couple beers, right? Or I'm gonna have a glass of wine." And then one turns into two, turns into three, right? And before you know it, that person's had 4 or 5 drinks before they go to bed. They get a shitty night's sleep. The next day of work is stressful because they're not only, maybe their job is just stressful, but they're also tired. And then it repeats. Yeah, damn, a tough day at work, blah, blah, blah. So we get stuck with our emotions. And I'll give another more kind of extreme example of the abused woman who returns to her abuser. Why does she do this, right? She's literally unsafe. She's being beaten. She obviously, I'm sure, typically preceding these types of situations, the man is being cruel or mean or yelling or whatever, right? So it's a very unpleasant situation. But why do a lot of women end up going back? Part of the reason is that it makes her feel alive. It makes her feel something. And at the same time, because that's what she's used to, it also makes her feel safe, which is a really strange notion, but it's actually true. So again, this isn't, of course, it's terrible that people are abused, and I think women should leave their abusers, but again, it's just an odd situation that we find that at least some women don't, right? They return to that situation. And that's because they're used to the abuse and they don't want to make a change. Making a change and being with a guy who was, nice and all that other stuff, they might not get those emotional highs. And that's, again, it's a weird kind of facet of human nature, but unfortunately it's true. And then the same is true of the abuser. He gets the high of being a total asshole and like getting angry, right? And that, or I guess that's a low. But then she comes back to him, they have amazing sex, and everything's wonderful and joyous, and it's all going to change and be different, right? And then they just go on to repeat that same pattern. And again, this isn't say that the woman is at fault, because typically it's the man who is instigating this sort of behavior. But it's a sad case, and it's an example of where emotions can be a trap for people. However, good news is people do change, right? Sometimes that woman and women do leave these men. Sometimes people do, in fact, lose weight and keep it off. Sometimes people do change their job or find a partner after years of struggle. So people do change. But what allows them to be successful? The first thing I would say is that they are open-minded. They're open to the change. What does that mean? Well, let's consider two extreme reactions to COVID to prove kind of the converse, right, of people who are not open-minded. And I should say here, I guess before we begin, being open-minded means that you're willing to consider that other ideas out there, right, other ways of living, other behaviors could be better or more correct than the ones that you think are true, right? It's being open to the idea, which we'll come to, that you're wrong. So again, let's go back and consider two of the extreme reactions to COVID. In Camp A is the group I will call anti-vaxxers. So these people they believe that basically every death from old age and heart disease and anything that happens, right? Anyone who's gotten the jab, if they die, it's because of the COVID vaccine. And this makes no fucking sense at all. Because people, of course, died of heart attacks and pulmonary issues and lung disease and cancer and other things long before we had COVID vaccines. So it's essentially motivated reasoning. They thought it was bad. They didn't like the government was telling them what to do, which is fair. But then in response, they kind of came up with this really crazy idea that like vaccines don't work and that they're dangerous and blah, 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 blah. Let me just make a quick point here. Vaccines are some of the best technology that human beings have ever invented. They're really helpful. You don't want to get smallpox, and you won't now because we fucking eradicated it because of vaccines. You don't want to get measles, which, I forget if it's measles or mumps, but now there's a bunch of people in the South who, like, their kids are getting measles or mumps or something. That's bad. Like, and it's totally avoidable because now everyone's paranoid about vaccines. Thanks, Joe Rogan. Good job, I guess. Thanks, Kennedy. But vaccines are good, right? And I'm not saying that if you have one that is proven to be like dangerous, but like I'm not aware of any. And again, change my mind if I'm wrong, but there's no data. And if there were data, let's be honest, if there were data that the COVID vaccines were really dangerous, don't you think that the doctors and nurses would tell you? Because they're taking them too. Don't you think that they'd be like, oh, I don't want to take that. That's super dangerous. But it's not the majority of people. It's like random ass doctors who've been like disbarred. So it's insane to believe that vaccines are causing people to die. And yet that is a pretty prevalent belief, right? And why does it persist? Because these people just aren't open-minded, right? They aren't willing to look at the facts of the situation and change their mind for the better. On the flip side, we have what I call the forever maskers. And these are people who still wear masks to this day. Like just today, I saw a guy on a street corner wearing a mask outside. Sunny day, beautiful out, a little bit of a breeze, no one around him. And he's wearing a fucking mask. And like, look, I get if you like wearing masks for some reason, God bless you, do it. But the idea that we need to be running around continuing to wear masks is just silly. Especially if it's like outside or alone in your car. Like that is, I mean, in the blog post I write that doing that is kind of like wearing a bike helmet to bed. That it's not making you any safer. It just makes you look silly. So that's, like the anti-vaxxers. I don't understand the forever maskers, the people who just like for whatever happened during COVID, they just now wear masks all the time, no matter what. I guess because they think that that's going to help them stay healthy. Now I understand, like if you're on an airplane or if you're sick, I mean, that's what masks are actually really good for, is if you're sick, you should wear a mask because you will be less likely to spread your germs to other people and get them sick. And yes, there is some utility to wearing a mask to prevent yourself from getting sick. But like, I mean, I don't know. What are we doing here? And people say, well, what's the harm? What's the harm? What's the harm? Here's the harm. I like seeing people's faces. It's nice to see someone smile. Isn't it? Yeah, it really is. So, like, I don't want to live in a society where everyone's just wearing masks all the time and it's like totally impersonal and, I don't like it. So, and if there's no reason for it, like if there's a reason, hey, yeah, I wore a mask during COVID, but COVID's over and these people don't seem to have changed their mind. I don't know why. I would say that probably the people who are in either camp don't have enough practice changing their mind for whatever reason. It also, honestly, and I know this sounds kind of mean, but it might just be kind of a lack of intelligence, like of just not really understanding how things work, right? And not being smart enough to realize, oh yeah, actually, I should get vaccinated, or yeah, I probably don't need to wear a mask, but they're out there. So, but don't be like them, right? Be willing to change your mind when better information presents itself. Which brings us to Elon Musk. Elon. Okay, so Elon Musk one time said, you should take the approach that you're wrong. Your goal is to be less wrong. Now, unfortunately, Elon appears not to be following that advice anymore. Seems like to me that he's kind of gone crazy, but it is what it is. Or maybe you like him. Again, if you think he's great, change my mind. But his idea here is great, is exactly right? That you should take the approach you're wrong. Your goal is to be less wrong. So we should always think about the fact, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't need to wear a mask. Maybe I should get a vaccine. Maybe it's not so dangerous. At least examine it. Maybe you examine that idea and you're like, well, actually, no, I was right after all. That's fine. But at least play with that idea. Consider the fact that you might be wrong. And I'll give you an example from when I was teaching. For those of you who don't know I was a high school English teacher for 14 years. Loved my students. It was great, but ultimately had to move on so that I could actually make some money. But anyways, it was a great time. But one thing I learned when I was teaching is that sometimes you plan a lesson and it just doesn't work. And I was a pretty good teacher, I thought, and I think most of my students, if you talk to them, they would support that. Not to say I was perfect by any means, or that there were days that I didn't just play a movie because I was over it. But for the most part, I was a pretty good teacher. But like I said, I still made mistakes. And one thing I learned was that when a lesson goes wrong, it's time to change, right? If all of my students are not wanting to do a lesson, it doesn't mean that they're all just being shitheads and they just want to watch TikTok on their phones, right? Maybe they do want to watch TikTok on their phones, and maybe some of them are being shitheads. But an entire class is not going to just refuse to work because of those two factors or any other factor. Kids mostly try. That's something that everyone should know about education, is that most kids are good kids and they're trying their best. So what I learned is that if something doesn't work, if I have a bunch of kids who don't understand the assignment or they don't want to do it, it's probably a bad lesson on my part. It's probably a bad assignment, and I need to change. And that was better for everyone. Instead of banging my head against the wall trying to get them to do something they didn't want to do, I just changed and did something different that they did want to do and that could still accomplish the same goal in learning. And I think that made me a fairly effective teacher. So what are some other reasons that people don't change their minds? As Upton Sinclair once said, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on not understanding it. This is very true, right? Think again about politics here. People tend to be very tribal. So even if they disagree with something that Trump does or that the left does, right, depending on which side they're on, they're still kind of like, I'm just going to say that I liked it because, that's what everyone else is saying that they like, and I'm supposed to be on this team, and so I'm just gonna play along. And Upton Sinclair points out that, look, if I if I want to drill oil, I don't really want to hear about global warming because I'm making money by drilling oil, and that's there's obviously a conflict of interest there. So that's one reason. One way I like to look at changing is it kind of like the software, like we have version 1.0, we have version 2.0, etc., etc. And version 1.0 is the first version, and then we change for the better, and now we get 1.5. And as we go through life, we should want to kind of continue upgrading our software. The problem is our ego does not want us to do this. Our ego is like, hey, what we're doing is working. Version 1.0 of Jeff Allen is working. Version 2.0 is working. So why would we change? And there's a good reason for this, which is that survival in and of itself during human evolution was pretty difficult. It was very difficult. Most children didn't live past like 8 or 9 years old. Most people didn't live much past 30 if they were lucky. We have kind of a biology that's inbuilt to want to continue doing the same things that we do, to continue doing the same things that are working because we're alive, and that's really good. Part of the reason people don't change is that like internally we don't want to change. We're not built to change. We're built to keep doing what we're doing because that's working. So we kind of have to override this. I'll give you an example here. Think about a person who is a heavy drinker or maybe even an alcoholic. And while he's drinking, maybe he thinks, I should really stop. But then his ego is going to say, well, but wait, man, people won't like you. You won't be very much fun. People will judge you for not drinking. You won't be able to go to bars. You won't be able to go to breweries. You're going to miss out. You're going to miss out, man. It's going to suck if you stop drinking. And so he kind of says, oh, yeah, well, I guess that's all true. He has to override that ego in order to then stop drinking. And there's going to be some discomfort there because like drinking is fun and it does make you feel better. And why would you go to a brewery or taste beer or taste wine, right? You're not going to do that if you stop drinking. But he'll discover, yes, despite these uncomfortable parts of it, that there's some huge advantages. He's going to lose weight. If he's single, he'll do better with women because he's not drunk. He's going to save money. He's not going to be hungover, so he's going to be more productive. He's going to be healthier. And so if he persists through that small period of discomfort for long enough, what he'll discover is that, hey, this is actually pretty great. And then version 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever version he's on, it's going to lock in, and then he can go from there. And he's not going to go back to that first version. Last point here that I'll make is, at least on people not changing and what to do about it, is if you're ever in a discussion with people, especially like a political discussion or a discussion where there's some disagreement, ask yourself this question, and you may also ask to other people. Am I willing to change my mind? Because if not, you're wasting your time. And I remember one time that me and my ex-girlfriend, we went to a Chinese restaurant to have some drinks and watch some football on a Sunday. And there was this guy sitting in a table nearby us, and somehow, for some reason, this was like 2022, I think. So COVID was fresh in people's minds, and he ended up starting to talk about how he didn't like the vax, and he didn't want his child to have the vaccine for COVID, blah, 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 blah. And I, as you know how I feel by now. I told him, like, well, actually the vaccine seems to work pretty well. It's going to prevent you from dying. It might not prevent transmission, but it will, prevent you from getting really sick in all likelihood. Blah, 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 blah. It's not really, there's no really good proof that it's dangerous. And, we kind of I never got really heated, but we just disagreed. And at some point I was just like, hey man, is there anything that I can say that's going to change your mind? Because if not, like, let's just watch football and chill. And that's what we did. So it's useful sometimes to just be like, yeah, or maybe we're just going to disagree here, and we can just talk about other stuff. So to kind of finish this section, I really encourage you to try to change your mind, and we can accomplish that by understanding there's going to be some uncomfortability, understanding that we're going to have to be open-minded, we're going to have to consider what it is that we're doing is wrong. And the last thing I want to point out on this is the change needs to be big. If it's just a little bit of a change, I'm just going to eat 10% less food. Well, hypothetically speaking, that should lead to a 10% reduction in your body weight. But it won't, because you won't actually do it. It's not enough to make a difference. And over time, you'll just continue to end up eating whatever it is you normally eat. So it has to be a big enough thing that's yep, I noticed that. For example, one thing I've started doing recently is I fast for at least 12 hours. So whatever time I eat dinner, I don't eat until that same hour in the morning. Or sometimes I even wait longer than that, which is a big difference. I used to just eat right away in the morning. So it's important when you're trying to make a change, make the change fucking noticeable so that you know, yep, this is what I'm doing. This is intentional. And then you can anticipate, yep, it's going to be uncomfortable, right? I had a stressful day at work, but I'm not going to have a drink. Instead, I'm going to go to yoga class. And that's what I'm going to do. And it's a big change because I'm going to get my fucking yoga pants on and I'm going to go over to that class. I'm going to sweat my ass off and do my downward dog, and it's going to fucking rock. That is some ideas on how to change. As with anything, there are always some exceptions here. And these are examples of when you should not change your mind. The first I'll bring up here is George Floyd and the whole thing about defunding the police. Now, caveat here. What happened to George Floyd was a murder, and it was awful. Absolutely disgusting and awful. And our justice system has a lot of problems. I think that if the system itself isn't racist, it does produce racist results, and we need to look at why that is. Whether that's poverty or inner city crime or whatever have you. There's a big problem when we look at our prison population, and 40 to 45% of them are black people. Either that means that we've got some big problems. And what happened to George Floyd was awful. However, after that incident, people started saying that they wanted to defund the police. People were justifying looting and setting fires and rioting and political violence. Now, I get it. Political violence is sometimes going to happen when people are really pissed off. But we had Democratic Party members saying that we should defund the police. That is fucking insane. You do not want to live in a society where there's not a police force. We need police to arrest bad guys. And just having them around prevents people from breaking into your home or your business or hurting other people or whatever. We need police officers. We this is one of the basic things that any civilized society has to have, is you have to have some kind of a police force. And yet people really glommed onto that idea and popularized it to the point where it had bad political consequences. And there are some cities where I live in Portland, San Francisco, Seattle. I travel to these cities all the time as part of my job. They're not great places to be downtown anymore. There's a ton of homeless people, which we need to build more housing. But there's also just a ton of crime, and there's a ton of, you pass by, every other store window is broken in a lot of cases because people are just smashing windows and not getting arrested. And this was especially true if you go back a few years ago when we had a DA, and I think the DA which is district attorney for those who aren't aware, and I think the DA in San Francisco, they just weren't charging people with petty crimes, which I don't, breaking into a car or stuff. And so what do you think happened? Well, people broke into fucking cars. So that was a horrible idea, and for some reason people went along with it. They changed their mind for a bad reason and came up with something really stupid, and we're all worse off for it now. The other example now, and I'll poke the right here, is Trump in the 2020 election. Trump told us that he wouldn't accept the results of the election if he lost, which is like the biggest loser thing you can possibly say. It's like, well, I won't, if I lose, I'll just claim that I won anyways. And everyone went along with it. Like whether they actually truly believe it or not, Republicans can't say that he lost that 2020 election because he's such a fucking baby that he won't let him say it, even though he lost. And if you don't think that he lost, like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, there wasn't fraud. And, like, I guess my other question would be, like, why are you willing to accept the results of this election that he just won? But, I mean, it's, like, purely if you win or not. And it's like, well, it's illegitimate if I lose, but it's legitimate. Like, think about that. Think about if it happened in reverse. And one thing I would say in both of these situations is think about, apply it to your own life. Apply what happened to your own life. Would you want to live in a city or in a town where there wasn't a police force and criminals just did whatever the fuck they wanted all the time and never got caught and were never punished? No, you would not. Would you want to live in a country where we never had legitimate elections because whoever lost just never conceded the election? No, you would not. That would not be a democracy. And I'll do one further now that Trump is back in office, which is, do you want to live in a country where the police or ICE can just go around rounding people up and sending them to foreign country with no due process of law? No, you don't. And for those of you who say, oh, they don't get due process if they're here illegally, yes, they do. Everyone gets due process of law. That's the point. That's exactly the point. And if you think that that's okay, understand that it could happen to you. What if you have a tattoo they don't like? What if your skin is too dark, or you spout a political view that the administration decides they don't agree with? If you deny anyone due process of law, you deny it for everyone, and that's not good. It's the same with freedom of speech. Freedom of speech doesn't mean speech you agree with. It means you agree that someone you hate and who has hateful beliefs gets to say whatever they want. Freedom of speech protects the right of the person to say the thing that you hate. And if you don't believe in that, then you don't believe in freedom of speech. So I would ask, here, really think these things through before you decide to support it. It's okay. Maybe you still support Trump, but you disagree with that. Or maybe you still think, hey, we need to do a lot, which I do. I find myself in this camp. We need to do a lot to figure out what is going on with why police kill people and why we have so many people in jail in this country. But I don't have to agree that we should defund the police. It's okay to have nuanced opinions, and I think that social media helps to make us forget that. I'll give one more example here, which is think about, is the situation plausible? Is it realistic? That's another time when it's like, well, if it's not, you probably shouldn't change your mind about it. And I'll give you the example here. When I was still teaching, I had a bunch of teenage girls in my fiction and poetry class. All of a sudden, all of them at once decided that they were either they, thems or he, hims. Now look, teenagers are going to fuck around and they're going to play at things and they're going to try on identities and things like that. But it struck me as not plausible that all of a sudden all of these people are actually experiencing gender dysphoria and, truly trans people. And again, to be clear, I support the rights of trans people. I think they should have the same legal rights and abilities as any American. And I think we actually have to go a step further and protect trans people because there are a lot of hateful beliefs that people have about them. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone, because it has to be awful to be born in a body that you don't identify with, to be born in the wrong body. So I think we owe it to trans people to help them in whatever ways that we can. I think what I saw, though, happening in the class was an example of social contagion, where we had a bunch of people, it became kind of vogue or popular for a certain sector of students to just start saying that they were trans, which has a couple problems. One is, what if they actually go through with getting changes to their body and then they realize, oh shit, like hair, once you cut your tits or your dick off, you can't put it back on. I mean, you can, I guess, but You get what I'm saying here. Once you start injecting hormones into your body of the opposite sex, there are some irreversible changes that are going to happen to your body. And I think that, we ought to be very careful about when we want to use those remedies for people. And the second part is that if you have a bunch of people who are saying that they are trans, but then they're not, because a few years later, which is what happened with many of these girls, just ended up being, regular cisgender, heterosexual, whatever you want to call it, girls after all, it kind of makes it seem like it's not real. It gives people a reason to believe that trans people are they just don't like being a man, so they want to be a woman or whatever. When it is real. People do genuinely experience gender dysphoria, and like I said, we've got to help them. But if we have a bunch of people pretending to be when they're not, that sucks. So again, kind of think through, is this plausible? Because if it's not, if it doesn't pass the eyeball test, then it's probably not true. The last section is about just ways that you can practice changing your mind. Some practical suggestions. So you could start listening to a different genre of music. You don't like country, listen to punk. You don't like country, listen to country. You don't like punk, listen to punk. You haven't listened to classical or jazz, maybe give it a shot. Put your head in a different space, and you might find that your mind is easier to change. Another thing you can do is read or watch the opposite political side. If you're a Republican, watch MSNBC, read the New York Times, listen to Pod Save America or some other liberal podcast. On the flip side, if you're on the left, watch Fox News, read the Wall Street Journal, read Breitbart, or listen to Charlie Kirk. You may not end up changing your mind and switching to the other side, and my guess is actually most people will not, but at least you'll have a better understanding of why they think what they think and how they believe what they believe. And I think that that's worthwhile in terms of just trying to understand people. Some other things you can do, take a class, learn a language at the local community college. Start a new hobby. Start paddle boarding or pick up fly fishing, or go to those yoga classes and make that a habit. Start a meditation practice. If it's something of interest to you, you can always try psychedelics. Obviously in a safe setting. Don't do anything illegal, of course, as well. Psychedelics, safely administered, can lead to some really, and I know this because I've done it, can lead to some really interesting ideas. And it can lead you to realize that you need to make some changes, or you want to make some changes in your own life. You get a pet. If you're going to be a good pet owner, I can guarantee that'll change your life. Promise you that one. But those are just some ideas. So if you have other ideas, again, if you have comments that you'd like to include or have me consider, if you want to change my mind, drop them in the comments. You can also contact me atjallen, JALLEN, getbetter, GETBETTER, at gmail.com. So it's jallengetbetter at gmail.com. And I think that's it for today, kids. Thanks for listening. Hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you get better soon. And I hope today that I persuaded you that changing your mind is good, and that it's a skill we should learn and practice. Namaste.